information started coming through, it sounds like my own inner voice, but the messages were using vocabulary that are not my own personal vocabulary. So that was like what is this? I had this calling, this urge after watching a documentary that introduced me to permaculture to see all of these systems work so beautiful in harmony. I'm strong, but I'm not as strong as a 600-pound animal. So I can't just use brute force, and I'm not going to use fear to control something that I wanted in my life. And honestly, I went back and forth of knowing deep in my heart that this is absolutely 100% true. And then the other half telling my husband if he thought I needed to be checked into a mental facility, that I trusted his judgment more than mine at this moment in time.
Allison, if you were to meet somebody at a local barbecue, or maybe in your instance, a local rodeo, how do you describe what you do when somebody asks you, what is it that you do?
I think it would depend on what I wanted or what I thought would be best achieved with the answer that I gave and the way I would go about it. I would be open with both things. Well, one, I am just a human, right? I'm just my human having my human experience. But if you ask what I do during my human experience, I'm a farmer, but I'm also a psychic medium. And which one I tell first depends on the situation. I do enjoy telling people that I'm a farmer first because they understand that I'm a grounded, logical, hardworking person that appreciates our world. And then when they have that on that foundation of who I am and how I live my life, I love to add the psychic medium part as a cherry on top, as a perk. It's like I'm connected to the earth here, hands in dirt, but I'm also connected to it in a completely different way as well. And I feel like when I say farmer first, psychic medium second, I kind of vet myself a little bit, and not to say that psychic mediums are a bunch of cookies, right? But I think there's some stereotypes that I would like to try to skirt around by introducing myself as what I enjoy doing that's more tangible for the common person to understand.
That makes total sense. People have a stereotype of a farmer as well in their mind, but that stereotype is usually more perhaps easily approachable and understandable, and there's not as many questions potentially around what a farmer does. A farmer grows crops and
Yes.
tends to
Yes.
animals, and you know, old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O kind of thing. So
Yeah.
and thank you for sharing, and I'd love to explore both of those areas. And I think where you and I have a lot of similarities and a lot of commonalities is that we both live with one foot in each of those realms. So I'm super excited to have you on and to talk with you and to get your perspective on this kind of life, because you know, I have my perspective, but you have a different experience, and you know, just life experience in general. So how did you get to be a farmer slash psychic medium? And I know, you know, it sounds like you're doing both of those things simultaneously, but is there, just give us a little backstory, like what came first, or like how did this situation come to be? Because my guess is that it wasn't always like this.
It wasn't always like this, and it's very recently been this. So, for the majority of my life, I went to school for graphic design, visual communications. So, I spent the majority of my time inside at a desk reading files that actually don't exist. And that felt good for a while because, we could stay up on our heads all day long creating. But I realized, not consciously realized, but I needed to start creating things like physical, tangible items. The thought of all of my work and efforts, if a server were to crash or be damaged, to be poof, just gone in smoke, just started to really not sit well with me. So I lived in the suburbs of Boston for 11 years, and during that time I started our first garden. Before that I had never gardened anything before. So this is my 14th year of gardening. Um, and so that was fun and felt novel, but when you get hands on earth, it's hard to go back when you really start to feel that connection. So our first garden was, maybe 4 feet wide by 12 feet long, right? Very easy to manage. And now we have our garden is bigger than our first whole property of our first home. And so that growing is just, I don't want to say in its addiction because it's not negative at all, but you understand like it's just a source of knowledge and joy and connection. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. And you want more and you want to explore more and you get more curious about what you can grow and do and make on your own. So I had been running my own freelance business for strategic communications, advertising, graphic design, all of that for a little over a decade. But I decided that I wanted to open up another business, which was a micro farm. And so on our little plot of land, we were just under 4/10 of an acre. I created an e-commerce site and I started growing. I had our own garden herbs. I was baking food from scratch. I had a beehive. So I was beekeeper and selling honey, and that felt really good, but not quite, it wasn't quite hitting the mark because my energy was what I didn't realize until later is my energy was still going out. More was coming out than was coming in. That's on me. So in 2020, we took the risk and took the leap, and we left the suburbs of Boston and we moved to central Connecticut. And it was for the basis of I had December 2020, I had this calling, this urge after watching a documentary that introduced me to permaculture to see all of these systems work so beautiful in harmony. Before then, as a child growing up in Missouri, I just was familiar with monoculture and monoagriculture, and that's all that I knew. And I didn't want that. It didn't make sense to me. But permaculture, when you've got livestock and plants and your forest and everything working together in this system that continues to replenish itself, that clicked, that made sense. So I stopped working for other people and I started working for Mother Nature. And we went to Connecticut and we started. This was my first time to have livestock larger than a chicken. In our very first year, we had pigs and goats and heifer calves and 100 meat birds and about 20 laying hens all together. So we just went straight on in. It was the most stressful, wild, chaotic, crazy time in my life. However, I always say that like that summer taught me you eat it when you're a farmer, you eat a slice of humble pie every day, and some days those slices are much bigger than others. So that is where I rolled into it, and I realized I still use my strategic thinking as a farmer because we have to really zoom out and see how all of these systems are going to work and think about the future based on the past and present in a positive, helpful, meaningful way. Whereas when we're worried about the past and future in some of our daily life activities, that can get us into a bit of a pickle when we start to overthink about things. But right now, I know that as a farmer, Mother Nature, she is my boss. She lets me know my schedule. She knows when I should work harder, when I should take a rest. And I love that. And I love that because it makes sense. And I know it's the truth. Nothing's hiding in the reason behind it. It just is. It's just information. So that is how I got here. And that's yeah.
There's no ulterior motive when it rains. It's just it just
Exactly. It's
it's
just
just
rain.
raining. There's no office politics about it. There's no wondering who's
Right.
going to get the promotion or if this is happening for this reason or that reason.
Yeah.
It's just raining, and yeah, there's a
It's
simplicity to
just
that,
raining.
and I think you're right. It's something that doesn't need to be overanalyzed. You can still have it. Still gives you structure in a way. It's feels kind of random at times, like when it rains, when it's sunny, when you can do certain things, and at the same time, it takes the burden off of you, and it I think it helps cultivate trust because there's a saying that I love that says nature never rushes, but everything always gets done. And
Yes.
rather than just thinking about that and that being a thought that's rolling around in your head, it becomes tangible and visible and experiential in your life. Like for me personally, it's helped me to develop a deeper faith. It's just like things are all going to work out. Every year, the spring comes, summer comes, the crops grow, things happen. It's never going to look the same,
Absolutely.
and everything that needs to get done does get done in its own time.
I love that you mentioned faith because it's faith that makes sense to me. It's faith that I can see that measurable proof, that measurable progress. Doesn't matter when I start my seeds, 3 weeks earlier than last year, ten weeks later than the year before. Somehow there's always something growing. And somehow I already always have too many tomatoes, and that's fine.
That's an awesome problem to have. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
as far as the garden goes, I love spending time in my garden, and no matter, like you said, no matter what you do, it's always going to be different, and that's part of the fun of it. I tend to like to let things go to seed and see what happens next year. This year,
Yeah.
I've got an
Yeah.
enormous, right in the middle of one of my rows, I have an enormous cilantro patch. I have no idea where it came from. It's like I don't eat that much cilantro. And every time I walk into the garden, it smells like cilantro and random dill plants everywhere. So
That's right.
I love it. And I think that's a really something that people don't think about when, if you've never spent time in a garden or have had a garden for successive years, just the amount of variety with that can happen in a relatively small plot of land. It's an adventure every
Yes.
time. You never really know what you're gonna get. And I think some people perceive gardening as work, as pulling weeds and watering and all the things that come along with it, which is part of it. And from my personal experience, there's just so much more to it.
Yeah. And I think some people will feel like gardening is a chore. And I can understand that feeling. When we moved to this property, we tried to work with the setup that the previous owner had that worked for her, but it super duper duper did not work for us. And I felt so I didn't feel defeated. I didn't feel angry. I just felt a little lost, like I can't believe that I can't just do my thing that I've been doing and doing well and then copy paste it to apply. So it's like kind of that parallel for life things. When you pick up and move, even though you still want to do the same thing, accomplish the same goals, you still might have to do it a completely different way. You still might most likely need to tear it all down and rebuild it to fit your new situation. So yeah, if gardening feels like a chore, you might want to try a different type of garden, right? Or a different type of plant, or a different, there's just so many different variables that if you take the time to think about the pros and cons of your setup and your plants and your own life schedule, you can either work with it or against it. And working against nature never feels good.
Yeah, that is a recipe for frustration and anguish. Now, I want to
Hmm.
commend you on your bravery in taking on so many animals your first year. A little bit about me. I grew up on a commercial farm, and I understand how much work animals are, especially large farm animals like cattle and even goats and pigs. Like they're all very unique. People think
Yes.
about farm animals and farm animals, but the lifestyle and requirements for a pig versus that of a goat versus that of a chicken, it's
It's like a parrot and a fish and a cat. You're like, I know they're all pets, but that's not.
yeah. So like I'm curious because I have a deep love for animals, and I'm always curious about other people's experience with them, and I know people are going to be listening to this, and there's going to be a certain amount of people who are thinking about getting a farm animal or farm animals of some sort at some scale. Going through your experience, starting at you basically went from 0 to 99. What was that experience like?
Yeah.
I know you said it was stressful and chaotic, but like if you were in the shoes of somebody who was thinking about doing what you did, like what kind of advice would you give them as far as farm animals?
So first, I want to say, although we did get everything, it was like the month of June, within a 4 week span, we went from just laying hens, just chickens, to everybody's here. So that was a lot. That's not how we had planned for it, but that's how it happened. So, first, with anything, your local library, especially if you live in a rural area, is going to be filled with a lot of great animal husbandry books. And I feel like, the internet is great for a lot of information, especially YouTube videos of people showing their homestead. And there's a lot you can learn about it, a lot of clever little tricks. And then a lot of things like, ooh, I see how that's not super helpful. And I'm just going to make note of that too. Because again, what works for someone may not work for you at all. So I'm very heavy on the planning and the research. I like to have as much information up front as possible. And I think the number one thing is don't just go and get an animal and think you'll figure it out later. That's doing a disservice, one, to the animal, who I feel is most important in this equation. And it's going to make your life, that's working against nature instead of working with it. It's not going to have you in a present state of mind when you're caring for that animal and listening or observing to it to understand its needs. So, one, lots of information, library, books, YouTube videos, blogs, Substacks. Like there's so much information. We have so much information at our fingertips. Please use that first. For the sake of the animal and the sake of your sanity, please use that first. The reason why we got all of the animals at once is because the property that we live on, although we have about 5 or 6 acres of field, haying field, there were no livestock. There was no livestock on it, so we did not have any infrastructure. So ours is kind of like a tournament bracket of like who's going to make the cut. We have intentions for each animal and the job that they would provide on the farm. So the pigs are assisting us in a different way now. They are in the freezer and nourishing us to do the work to keep going on, but they were great at taking up the poison ivy. The goats, we actually rehomed to a family that's all about goats, like a 4-H family with goats, because we wanted them to do the poison ivy and clear the brush, but it wasn't exactly beneficial. And with the fencing that we had, they knew when the electricity was off and they would slip under and run and eat our apple trees, right? So it was like a not doing your job and doing more harm than good. The cows, the cattle, right? That's for dairy and that's for regenerating the land with their manure. So that's an obvious stay. And the chickens, we had chickens at our previous home, but the amount of chickens in a backyard, suburban backyard to 10 acres of land, that's a very different scenario. So it was a big learning curve. So we wanted to learn all of it all together and see what we didn't need to consider anymore or what, in theory and in practice, so that we could devise our infrastructure that didn't exist for everything to work happily. And it was very much like the farmer and the bag of grain and the duck and the fox getting across the stream. He can only
I
leave.
don't know that story. Please
Oh,
enlighten me.
so it's like on two sides of the stream, and the farmer can pick two things to bring over at a time. The farmer can't leave the duck and the feed together because the duck will eat the feed. He can't bring the duck and the fox over because the fox will eat the duck. And so he has to be very strategic about order of operations. So if you go in for the big deep dive because you want to understand the order of operations that you're setting up from scratch, I get it. Just don't commit to anything for like 2 years. And I hope you'll make it out. And also ask for help. Meet your community members. Don't be afraid to admit when you're in trouble, in a pickle. And a livestock vet if you've got one available. Don't, proactive versus reactive is a big lesson.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And yeah, there's just so
Yeah.
many intangible things that come up with animals, especially at scale, animals that are outside, animals that, and especially if you don't have prior experience with them, you're never going to be aware of or understand like how tenaciously goats and pigs will test a fence, and their ability to find even the tiniest crack or way out of a fence, or somehow have this incredible intuition about when the fence is not on, and like the fence goes off for 30 seconds, and then you yeah, and then they're it's like a
Yeah.
jailbreak, and they're booking it towards
Yeah.
the apple trees, towards the tasty branches that they know
Yeah.
they can reach. Something that's really stuck with me, a piece of wisdom that I learned, is that every minute you spend in preparation is going to save you 10 minutes in execution. So that's
Hmm.
as much as there is a part of me who wants to just wing it and try things, and I do. I also recognize that depending on the circumstances, that may not give me the outcome that I want, or often it'll just create more work for me on the back end. And I can almost always look back and say, okay, if I'd sat down for a half an hour and just planned this out, this situation would have probably gone a lot more smoothly.
Yes, don't underestimate the power of a blank piece of grid paper. Um, and also, I think it's a really good practice and balance of embracing restrictions or embracing letting go of control. What is within your control is the knowledge you can do up front, the materials and tools that you can have on hand. Do as much of that good control as possible up front so that when it's time to actually do the thing, and now there's so much out of your control or out of your hands, that you've got the tools and the knowledge to handle it gracefully and in a positive way. If you're trying to go like winging it on both ends, it is not gonna, your cows are going to be tagged on Facebook, right? That like your whose cows are out. I don't know. That's like what our local Facebook group is. Someone's cows are out, someone's pigs are out, someone's goats are out. Like that
You don't want to be
happens.
that neighbor.
I get it. Yeah, that neighbor that it's like the daily.
Of all the animals that you've had and up to this point, which ones have you enjoyed the most and why? And I'm not going to ask you what your favorite is, because for me that's a hard question. But which ones do you find yourself spending the
Sure.
most time with, or enjoying their presence the most, and why?
I would say our miniature heifer Jersey Dexter cross being cricket are their names. Are heifers who are currently bred, and then once they give birth, I can officially call them cows, and they are actually cows, right? But they're not cows yet. Um,
You must have some nitpicky
they
neighbor
have been
around
my
you who is constantly correcting you. It's not a cow yet.
well, you know, when you're the city girl, you know, coming from the city, and you don't know not that I have any neighbors that do that, right? But I feel like the tech is like that bull is not a cow, and there's there's a benchmark of like if I don't use the actual words, like what does she actually know, right? Um, so our heifers, Poppy and Cricket, I would say I highly favor them because they have taught me the hardest lessons I need to learn about myself. The amount of confidence you need, like I'm only 5'4". I'm strong, but I'm not as strong as a 600-pound animal. So I can't just like use brute force, and I'm not going to use fear to control something that I wanted in my life, right? That I wanted this symbiotic relationship with this livestock in my life. And so how am I going to do that? Well, I have to have confidence in myself to know that I can work with this animal in a way that is safe for myself, safe for it, and a mutually enjoyable experience. It's really easy to do that with something smaller than you. Not really easy, but it is much easier, right? When you can just hold on to a rope or a leash, or the chicken is in the coop, and you know, I lift up the broody chicken to get the 16 eggs that from underneath her, like my daughter and I did yesterday, right? That's not hard. And so that's they have been my greatest challenge because they have showed me my own greatest challenges. It's like doing my own shadow work. I'm like, all right, here we are again. There's just so much to maneuver, and so much you have to be so present with large animals out of safety for both of you. And they forced me to understand what being truly present is all about. Without them in my life, I'm not sure if I would have developed my psychic mediumship abilities.
Wow.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah,
as you were saying that, like what came up for me is like, yeah, these especially large animals, it's like they are such a clear and pure mirror of yourself. They
yes.
they are, and they're so sensitive. Horses and cattle, donkeys, like the larger ungulates, their heart fields, the electrical fields around their hearts are huge. They're just incredibly in tune with the things around them in their environment. The way that they interact with you and the way that they react to you is it's not obviously apparent initially, but they're just reflecting your energy.
They're
It's
just
like it's just
reflecting. Yeah,
straight
yeah.
your energy, and if you come at them in a certain way, they're going to respond in a certain way. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
like I'm so grateful for the amount of time that I've been able to spend with large animals and growing up on a farm, like a commercial beef farm. Through observation, I learned certain ways to deal with large cattle, and which was not really a compassionate way to deal with animals, quite frankly.
Hmm.
And at
Agreed.
at a, and at a
Yep.
certain point in my journey, I realized like, these are living beings. They may not be sentient in the way that we are, but there is a consciousness there. There's a there. I need to treat these animals
Hmm.
with kindness and compassion and love and respect. And
Yes.
when my behavior and when that shifted in me, like not to use fear, but to use like curiosity and just to work with them rather than against them. Like I remember specifically helping my dad sort cattle at one point after that shift, and I would just if there was a cattle, if there was a animal in the group that my dad wanted out, he would point to it, and I would just walk up to them and make eye contact with the ones and like just slowly just peel it off the herd. And my dad stood behind
Hmm.
me, and like I could tell something was like he was trying to compute what was happening because he'd never.
How'd you do that without
Yeah, you didn't
hollering
have to
at it,
swing a
right?
stick at him, you didn't
Yeah.
have to you didn't have to cuss at him, and it's like, yeah, they're
Yep.
so smart and they're just reacting to me. They're just reflecting back my own energy to me. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And to me, it's like an incredible opportunity working with animals, especially large animals, to yeah to to face your own stuff because that's eventually what comes up. And
Yeah.
if you find yourself in a place or a situation where you're getting frustrated, it's like, well, it's hard to push a 600-pound animal that doesn't want to go anywhere. It's like, oh, okay, like I need to change my behavior and my vibe and my energy. Like the only way the situation is going to get resolved and I get to the result that I want is by working on myself and changing my own approach. And I'm really curious that you brought up the psychic mediumship and developing that in the context of working with your cattle. Like talk a little bit more about that.
So we normally do rotational grazing throughout our field, and we move Poppy and Cricket through the field every couple of days. Although strenuous, like that's very rewarding, and we're seeing our field revive itself without the use of any man-made materials. Just good old cow manure plopping around like the good Lord intended. But one of our girls was getting a little, she was looking like a very well-to-do Renaissance woman. It's very plump, getting large, and she needed to shed a few pounds just to in hopes for a healthy AI in birth. So we put her in a lot and fed her
What do you
hay.
mean AI in
Um,
birth?
oh, sorry, ChatGPT did not get our cattle pregnant. We use artificial
Okay.
insemination. Yeah. So we do not have a bull on the property, and that's not something, I know I'm crazy, but not that crazy to add that into the mix. So our AI tech suggested that we not move her through the field that summer, and just so that we could control her portions better to help her lose a little bit of weight because a heavier cow giving birth is not good for the it's a lot of stress on her physical body. So throughout that summer, instead of spending my time moving fences around, I was scooping manure out of her lot. And again, I care about my animals very much, so I was scooping her area twice a day. And when you're out there scooping manure, and it's quiet and it's 6 a.m. and you're just hearing the birds and the leaves, and your mind just starts to go. And what I didn't realize at the time is that scooping the manure puts me into a flow state almost like instantly. And my mind clears, and it's more like a working meditation, like a moving meditation for me. And because life was so chaotic and there was a lot of stressful things going on in my family in that moment in time, like, bigger extended family, that was the only time my mind was clear and I wasn't thinking about the past or thinking about the future. And so in those moments is when I started to receive what I now know it, but didn't know at the time, were downloads from higher self, from source, from spirit, from God, whatever word you would like to use. And information just started to drop in. And so I started to document these things. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I would just jokingly call it manure meditations. But it felt so good that I was like excited to scoop poop every day, like right, running out before breakfast, before coffee. And then those downloads became more detailed, more elaborate. Things started happening. Like the messages that came through started, like they were premonitions for things. And that's when I realized, and information started coming through. It sounds like my own inner voice, but it was choosing the messages were using vocabulary that are not my own personal vocabulary. So that was like what is this? And then I had some larger events of deaths in my life. So shortly after this started. And so the combination of the two really just kind of like pulled the plug on my abilities. And I had a lot of aha moments realizing that what I was experiencing out in with the cows or the cattle was psychic mediumship, the connection with source. So I still go out there every day. I still love it. Messages still come through. And now that I'm like, all right, everybody, I'm here. It's like going home and checking your answering machine, right? Like, what did I miss while I was asleep or didn't miss? But now I'm ready to hear and ready to receive now. And it's all the time. And I love it. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. I don't let anybody else scoop manure.
Wow, that's quite a statement. And I wonder if that's going to change over time, or I wonder if that's going to be a thing that you maintain. And I so resonate with so much of what you said. Like, I'm up in the morning, I'm looking forward to going out and changing the duck water and checking on. We have a little
Yeah.
heifer calf. She was our little surprise, Gracie, and she's actually 3 months old today. Every morning, I look forward to going out and saying hi to the ducks, saying hi to Gracie, opening up the chicken coop. We have a we have a chicken named Specky who's always waiting at the door, ready to get out first thing in the morning. We call it chores, but it's really it can be more than that if you allow it to be. And like most things in life, it comes down to your perspective and how you choose to look at the situations. And yeah, on one hand, it could be another job, something that you really don't want to do, or if you just kind of surrender to it and can go with it, it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. It's not about adding more. It's usually 99% of the time about subtracting and taking away the mental clutter
Yes.
or the things that are potentially blocking you or taking up space that spirit would love to come in and give you a download into. But when your cup is full, there's no room for anything to come in. And I think most people are running with their cups flowing over from just Instagram or YouTube or just things coming in. We allow ourselves to be bombarded by information, and we don't have strong boundaries around what we're willing to let in and having personal, dedicated, quiet, meditative time and space that what is available for a lot of people, or pretty much everybody, so few people actually get to experience because they don't create that environment, that mental, or create that spaciousness in their life for these things to be able to come in.
You hit on the two fullness of our lives and our minds. Um, I'm currently writing a memoir of the first year of my life of my abilities awakening. And the very beginning of that, in the world of psychic abilities, mediumship abilities, and all of the, woo woo of it all, I had no prior experience or knowledge or interest in it. And so when I started scooping that manure and started just receiving these downloads, I started like kind of checking into it with some friends that I had and just like, the internet. And the internet told me about the full moon being a time to let go of something. And this was at a really pivotal moment of my life. My mother was about to pass. I had a lot, like, there's a lot of shadow work, inner things, just like everything coming to a head. And so I was like, all right, like, whatever. What's the worst that could happen if I do this full moon? Like, I look at the moon and I let something go, right? And I imagined, like, when I went out and looked at the moon, I had this visual of like a pie chart, right? And my pie chart was totally full. It was cram jam, 100% full. So, what's that biggest wedge? What wedge am I willing to just take out and say, like, I don't need this anymore? And I'm gonna, and I like imagine myself giving this little wedge to the moon. And it was, decided to choose the biggest or most difficult wedge that I've been carrying around with for my whole entire life. And it just, I didn't think that was ever possible. But I was like, I'll give this to the moon, whatever, right? I gave that openness, right? My pie wedge was ready to receive something new. And, although scary to let go of something you that's familiar, even though it's not beneficial to you, I just had to do it. That boiling point, that crescendo, that like something needed to happen, and so I made that choice to let go. And oh my gosh, yeah, it just started going from there. So I encourage. This is actually full moon tonight, by the way. So I know it won't be next full moon. Every full moon doesn't have to be a full moon. Let go. If this interests you, just pick something. Just imagine a little wedge and just send it off. Say thanks and then goodbye.
Wow, like that touched on something for me, and I think it's fortuitous, and I'm feeling it, so I'm gonna share it. My partner and
Yeah.
I plan tonight to go do a full moon ritual of a similar sort, like you mentioned there. And this has been something we've been planning for at least a week and a half. Something that we're gonna do tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you brought that up, I don't think it's a coincidence, and yeah, don't think it's a coincidence. And wow,
It's
yeah,
easy to take that little pie wedge, like the one with the line pointing to it, because that wedge is so small. You're like, yeah, but like, no, take the big wedge, the biggest wedge. You're like, no, I'm pretty sure that wedge is cemented here. Nope, just you got
yeah,
it.
and it just clicked with me what that wedge is for me, and I'm feeling a bit emotional right now. And before we were talking, I was going through a bit of a process, and I typically meditate before recording one of these episodes, and just thinking about farming and the land that I'm on, knowing that I'm going to be talking to you, and this is going to be part of the conversation. In the beginning, you said you introduce yourself as a farmer first because people have a preconceived notion, like people kind of know what that is. And you mentioned there's like a logical person with their hands in the dirt, and people who are connected with the earth, and people who care about nature. When you said that, I realized that that is not my perception of farming whatsoever. It's actually the exact opposite of that, because I grew up
Yeah.
on a commercial industrial farm, not a big one, and I never saw logic in what we were doing. I never saw connection. I never felt that growing up. and it was something that I wanted so deeply, but the the way that commercial industrial farming is done, it's it's not that at all. And
No,
there's a
not
part
at
of me that
all.
wants to be proud of the land and my community and where I'm from. And there's also a part of me who recognizes like what's happening with industrial agriculture is deeply harmful
Horrific.
and not in accordance with nature. The pesticides, the herbicides, the way animals are treated and commoditized, and the piece of the pie chart that I need to let go of is this preconceived notion that it has to be that way and that that's what farming is, because that was all I knew about farming from the time I was for as long as I can remember, and I've internalized that and have resisted the idea of farming for a long time because that's what I associated it with. And there's always been a
Right.
conflict in me, and I think a lot of people feel conflicted about farming. On one hand, we want to believe that farmers are doing the best they can, and I believe that people do the best they can with the resources that they have. And
Hmm.
the people in my family, the farmers, my grandfather, our neighbors, they're incredibly good people who want to do what's right and who believe that they're doing what's right, and they're in a system that's not set up for them to be able to have that
Yes.
connection. It's yes, on one hand they're making a choice to be doing the work that they're doing, and this has been something that's been in motion, that they're just kind of a cog in the wheel. They're just going along doing what the rest of the people around them are doing, wanting to do the best that they can. And yeah,
I think you touch on a point where I agree everyone's trying to do their best. But then on the flip side, you get hit with, well, that's the way we've always done it. And it takes something to change that. And part of the reason why we enjoyed this property, I guess disclaimer, we don't farm for profit. We are technically, we are a homestead and we don't sell anything. There's just, for a lot of reasons, this is for ourselves to sustain our family. And so what we really enjoyed about this property is it has the land and space for animals, but it didn't have infrastructure set up to handle the animals in a certain way. We got to handle them on our way. I also think I have a little bit of a unique opportunity when I introduce myself as a farmer, because usually what I hear is, you don't look like a farmer. And then I get to say, yeah, well, I'm not like, I farm in a different way. And I get to use that as a segue into education of how we can do things differently and how different is not always bad. Different can be very good, different can be beneficial. But when we're talking about commercial farming, when it's, millions of dollars for machines, subsidies, all of these things, like we didn't want to go in for profit because we didn't want the red tape. We really wanted to give back. I know I'm very grateful to be in that position that we don't have to sell. We will be like, we're breeding our cattle, one for milk, right? But also so that we can sell it. And that would be the extent of it. But I know it's a rock and a hard place to make such a big change when there's so much restriction tied on farms that get passed down generation to generation. And I don't want to come across as like that's something easy, that's a easy hurdle to jump over.
yeah, it's such a deep and nuanced topic, and it's a part of our like America, like the founding of America. America was the United States was as we know it today. I mean, there were obviously people here before, and especially in the area that I'm in southwestern Minnesota, there's a rich indigenous history and culture, and I want to acknowledge that. And America, as we know it today, the country that it is, was founded by people who, in large part, like came across and settled this incredible land and were agriculturists, farmers, and without that, cities wouldn't be. You wouldn't be able to have a city if there wasn't a food, an external food supply being shipped in. So a lot of the growth, and for better or worse, that this continent has experienced is as a result of the toil and hard work of people who are willing to work with the land and farm it and do that agricultural labor and play that role, which allows the flourishing of industry and all that comes along with that. And what about your story? The thing that is kind of clicking with me is that you're moving in the opposite direction. Like you're from Boston to a
Yeah.
homestead away from the city. You mentioned your memoir. What was your experience like as you became aware of your psychic abilities, or as these gifts started to become more prominent? I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how this kind of began and started to become more of a thing in your life.
Sure. So focusing, yeah, more on that psychic ability, it really started a few years prior in 2020 when my grandfather passed. And he was really my true connection with nature. He fished, he made, was always in his workshop making tools and contraptions and, you name it, he did it. And so some of my most cherished experiences out in nature were connected with him. So when he passed, I did have a visit with him, and that was really wonderful. And that was kind of the kickoff point of, oh, this life after death, like that's a thing. Like it's not over
So
then. And
you had a
so
visit with
yeah,
him after he passed. So when he was out, okay,
yes,
when he was
yeah. So I'm just like kind of low key throwing that in. So yes, a couple of weeks after he had passed, I woke up in my bed. My husband was still like he loves to fall asleep on the couch before falling asleep upstairs, right? So he wasn't in bed yet. I turned over, and my grandfather's silhouette is very distinct with his nose and just the shape of his face. So I very much saw him, and in his final years, his strength was weakened, and so instead of what we call the big bear hug, right, it feels like he's going to crack all your ribs. He would do a squeeze 3 times with the hand, the strongest he could get. And so when I looked over in the bed, I saw his silhouette, and I could feel his hands. I could feel the wiriness of the hair on his knuckles, and they were large, and I could just feel the texture of his skin, and I could feel that 3 hand squeezes. And so, and that was the visit. Um, and I was awake. I was there. Like, I know it, that was him. I didn't try and deny it. And he's a very active person in spirit. It's not just me, many members of my family, lots of different. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I see you, Grandpa. Like, and so he is not a guide, but he is, a past love. On him and some of my guides have really shown me how we work through life, how we move through life, how we move through time. And again, it's all this information that came in and like makes logical sense to me. I'm like, yeah, all right, that checks out. But that's nothing I would have never come up with on my own. So from his death, that kind of kicked it off. And then my mother passed in September of 2023, and the connections with her and the communications with her, undeniable. The amount and other people witnessing it and experiencing it. And honestly, I went back and forth of like knowing deep in my heart that this is absolutely 100% true. And the other half telling my husband if he thought I needed to be checked into a mental facility, that I trusted his judgment more than mine at this moment in time. So that year, so much growth in me, my ability to trust myself, my ability to remember and recall and just really not gaslight myself anymore. A lot of information came out about the ability to zoom out and really look at something, all of these different situations, not just from my Allison horse blinder perspective, but all different perspectives. And in that ability, practicing it and working with it, and now trying doing my very best to live that way on my in my daily life, is that when you look at a situation, whether it's trauma, like I'm going to just use trauma for this conversation, very traumatic experiences, we relive it in this same perspective over and over and over. And if we zoom out a little bit and we're willing to look at it from different angles and think about that bigger reason of why it might have happened or could have happened or what was going on for the other people involved, well, then it starts to, your perspective starts to dissolve and it's just an event. And now it's just rain. Now it's just information. Going back to the beginning of this conversation. And so really my memoir is taking multiple traumatic events in my life that are quite relatable, unfortunately, to the majority of people everywhere, in giving this deep, vulnerable, like play by play of working it out and zooming out and looking at it in different perspectives to be able to heal from it. And the more you do, the more I did that, the more my abilities just kept stronger and higher and more. I'm so grateful for it. It was the hardest year of my life. I have never cried harder. I have never felt more confused. I have never felt more alone and not alone at the same time. Um, and so, yeah, now let's see, August will be 2 years for me of my spiritual awakening. And in this second year, I can say that now with this firm confidence in myself, firm confidence in my ability, no longer willing to potentially gaslight my, is that real, is that not? Life is so much more richer and makes so much more sense. And I'm so grateful for scooping manure. So and then when I believed in myself, right, I stopped trying to gaslight myself. Then I was able to provide readings in this same sort of insight for other people. You know, first starting with family members, then like distant friends, and now for complete strangers that book readings with me. And that feels really good. And that feels like the symbiotic relationship that I want to have with my fellow humans. And I love it.
So there's an interesting paradox there, or sort of paradox, and it's something that we again talked about earlier in the conversation. But that gaining an ability doesn't mean you need to do more. It's doing less. And as you were talking there about
Mm-hmm.
zooming out, I kind of perceive that as you were learning how to disidentify with the personal Allison, with like, yeah, you were learning to take a larger view and see things from a perspective that maybe is not from right behind your eyes. It's not the it's a
Yeah.
less egocentric perspective, and gaining the ability to look at things as more of an observer without having so much attachment to the outcome, or the ideas of Allison, or the memories of Allison, but but gaining a maybe more objective, or just a nuanced perspective on situations that you lived through and had a lived experience of, but then were able to derive new meaning from, given the different perspective. And I think that the term, the phrase bypassing, I feel like is getting thrown around a lot now. And like, I could see how somebody might label what you described as bypassing, choosing to look at your lived experience through a different lens, as if that is a form of not acknowledging what's actually going on, or trying to create something that's not there, or give that situation meaning that it didn't inherently have. So I'm curious about your, as you're evolving, it sounds like you're still, I think we're all in a process of life. And it sounds like you're still in this process of getting more clear and learning, especially if you're doing readings. It means you are more so in the observer position. You're less identified with the ego, and a strong sense of self, and able to connect with other senses of self. So like what would you say to somebody who's maybe never had that experience of, allowing yourself to maybe not cling so tightly to who you think you are, or the thoughts you have about yourself?
I don't think we have to put a trigger warning about this, but I would say many of what I things that I work traumatic events I work through is still working through, because if you're not working on it, like you are, right? Like just wait, take a breath, blink, and you'll see that you still have more to do. Many different about all of the different types of abuse experienced thoroughly in my life. And so I let that define me in a lot of ways as a survivor of this one, that one, that one, that one, that one. And I realized I don't want to be labeled like we carry our labels like badges as the way that we can relate to each other. And I get that because it feels like a sense of community. And for many years I did that. Majority of my life. Almost my entire life, right? And so I see it like the visual that comes to me right now to explain it is you think of like those big onesies, like the hooded onesies. It's a big zip up, right? And you just see my face and I've got this onesie on. And it looks like that's part of me. It's covering every inch of my body except for my face. And maybe it's like one of those really fuzzy ones and you don't really see that there's a zipper and you don't think you could ever get out of it. I can't put my head through the armhole. I can't, right? There's no way to get out of it. It's just part of me.
I'm
Okay,
seeing you
whatever.
as like a Teletubby, like your face on a
Yeah, yeah. You
on a Teletubby body.
choose whatever full body suit you want me to be in at this moment in time. But when you realize that there's a zipper there, and you can unzip it. Maybe it's in the back, maybe it's, maybe in the front it's a little bit easier to see. Maybe it's in the back and you just felt like something hitting and you're curious enough to pull it down and see what's really there. So when I see my biggest wedge of my moon, right, was my biggest earliest traumatic experience. And when I was willing to zip this survivor, this victim of this experience and remove it from me. And then I just see it laying there on the floor and I'm like, oh, that wasn't me. This is me. This was just something that was very closely connected to me for it wasn't even connected. It was just hanging on me. And so just acknowledging that these experiences are experiences. I yes, they happen to me, but I am not them and they are not me. In something that my therapist helped me actually told me about the your cells turn over every 7 years. So every 7 years you're physically a new person. She's like, this what happened to you back then, that's not even who you are now. And something that I recently realized is, for homesteaders, they talk about that 7 year mark of like you've. And so I think about the turning over and regeneration of the land and your efforts and your whole way of living changes and somehow in the same amount of time that that cell turnover happens in your own physical body. Isn't that funny? And so I just think about it as a process that you need to start. It's not easy. It's not enjoyable in a lot of parts. I could have stayed in that. I could have kept my little onesie on of like the victimhood, and everybody was like, I also am a victim of this thing. I too have this outfit on, but I would like to just get to know the real me. And so I was willing to do that. So I feel more like bypassing would be to keep that label or badge of victim or survivor on. I feel like that's bypassing.
And I think that's kind of why I felt like it was paradoxical. Like letting go of it is actually completing a process and going through the entire process of whatever that was, and finally letting go of it is like having the full experience. Whereas, so you're not bypassing it. It's, I think what a lot of people perceive as or label as bypassing is just the completion of a process and no longer identification with it. It's like, no, yeah, that thing happened, but I'm not that thing. I'm not bypassing it. I'm just done with it. I've learned what I needed to learn. I don't necessarily need, whatever that thing that was on me, that experience, that self identification. That's not necessary at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I know I am more than that. I know I am more than just a farmer. I know I'm more than just a mother, a psychic medium, a victim, or a survivor. Those are just experiences versus this is me.
When it comes to that, this is me part. Do you have
Mhm.
any practices or mindsets or like any tangible things that you've done or that somebody else can do to help realize that this is me beneath all of the layers of trauma and labels and identification?
This is new territory for me. So, as you know, it's very recent in my journey. So, I will do the best I can to describe how it feels for me. One, as cliche as it sounds, is my inside, my inner monologue, my inner thoughts are matching what I'm comfortable speaking and doing. My inner world matches my outer world. For many years, majority of my life, right, I always felt like I was too much for people and kept so much of that hidden and repressed. And it feels like if you feel like you have to hide part of yourself, I think taking a really good look at why you feel that way, because it's probably not something that you decided. It was probably an experience that you had that made you say, okay, I realize it's not safe to do this anymore. It's not safe to speak this way, look this way, behave this way. I need to close that. And so just take a big hard look in the way, if it's meditation, if it's therapy, if it's uh, journaling, like whatever feels good, if it's just walking out in nature and just letting the plates tell you. Whatever suits you, figure out why you feel like you can't have that internal factor match your external life. I think that's the biggest one, because now I don't feel the need to censor myself anymore. And that has been really freeing. It was very scary at first, right? I didn't tell anyone besides my inner circle about these psychic mediumship abilities for the first year and a half ish. Oh, year. I don't know if I've depart went down a different path too much from your original question, but inner world meeting outer world, and this is a fluid. There's no barrier here. There's not like gates that need to open and shut. It's just freely moving back and forth. There's no boundary anymore that I put up, that I decided I needed to put up.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's a perspective and something I hadn't really considered or just hadn't really thought about in that way. I've thought about it in different ways, but the way that you articulated that was something I had not heard before. It is kind of expanding my perception of and how I think about authenticity and just being yourself by allowing identifying those internal boundaries and barriers that we ourselves either put up or agree to, and really examining them and seeing, is this really in alignment? Is this preventing me from having that alignment between the external world and the internal world, and recognizing that if there's a dissonance there, it's going to manifest in our lives in some way that's probably
Unsavory.
yeah, probably unsavory. Yeah, that's a great word to use. Allison, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I'm sure there are going to be people who, oh yeah,
Thank you
you're
for
most
having me.
welcome. I'm sure there are going to be people who want to learn more about your work and the services that you provide in your uh, psychic mediumship. I know you're not selling eggs at this point, but maybe in the future that'll be,
Yeah.
maybe people will want to know where your farm stand is. But in terms of people wanting to inquire about having a session with you or learning more about how you help people, how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, little less than normal right now because I'm out in the garden and not on the computer. You can find me. My name on Instagram is Brain Wiggle, And my website is brainwiggle.com. I offer psychic readings, psychic mediumship readings, and I also do intuitive business consultations. So that's where I do a little bit of a psychic connection, energetic connection with you. So I use this part of, one side of my skills to help tap into what's holding up your business. And then I use my former experience in strategic communications and strategic planning to help figure out, okay, we've identified what's in the way, and let's work on order of operations in a logical, analytical, fiscally responsible way to achieve those goals for your company's highest and greatest good.
That's awesome. And I feel like there are more and more people who are beginning to recognize that our mind, body, and spirit are all interconnected. Our business and our vocation, our work life is intimately connected with our physical health and our spiritual health. So finding a place where you can
So,
address both of those areas at the same time is probably going to give us a more holistic view and a clearer picture of the tangible things that we can do that are going to really move the needle in our business and get us to progress in the way that not only feels good but is uh, responsible, as you say. It all works together rather than just trying to level up one area of our life while not
yeah, gotta raise
yeah,
everything
while
together.
ignoring all the other
Yeah,
stuff. It's like, no, if we look at all these things and try to try to bring balance and bring everything up simultaneously, that's going to be a better approach and a more sustainable way to progress and build the kind of thriving and abundant lives that we want. Allison,
absolutely.
thank you so much. I feel like we could talk shop for a long time, and I hope that we can someday in the future have another conversation. I'd love to hear about the progress on both fronts, on your farm and on your psychic mediumship journey at some point in the future. And I'm sure you'll have a lot of stories to tell.
Oh, I'm sure it will be my pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison.